Virgil Grissom. He moved here when he was about 1.5 years old. He was actually born south of City Hall on 6th Street. But he did move in here. This is the only home that he actually knew. The picture on the wall here kind of shows him at age 3, so that's pretty much what he might have looked like when he first moved into the house. And then shown with him there is his sister Wilma, who was 2 years younger than him. I always like to point out this picture here. Shows Virgil standing on the car fender. Kind of how he lived the rest of his life. He wanted to be higher and faster and taller than everybody else, so that was a pretty good indication even at age 6 about how he was going to live his life. These are the 4 children that grew up in this house. Virgil was not the oldest child. There was a daughter, Lena, older than Virgil, but she was stillborn, so she never lived in the house, of course. But you have Virgil, Wilma, Norman, and Lowell. Norman and Lowell are still alive. Norman is in Florida. Lowell is in the St. Louis area, and Lowell visited us in May this year. This would have been the parents' bedroom. As you can tell, there's very little privacy, just a curtain, but that's how a lot of the old houses were. We think these 3 rooms on this side of the house date to before 1900. The house, the rest of the house was configured when the Grissoms moved here in late 1927, early 1928. So the footprint is basically the same, other than there was an entrance in the kitchen. There was a side porch that the walk led back to. In here, the only thing that really is a Grissom piece, Mr. Grissom was in the civil defense during World War II. That's his civil defense hat. And when Lowell was here, he asked me if I'd ever put on that hat. And I said, no. He said, that thing's heavy. You wouldn't want to wear it for very long. Here's a picture of Virgil in his Army Air Corps uniform. He was Army Air Corps before he was Air Force. A lot of people don't realize he was actually Army Air Corps in World War II. And then in Korea, he was Air Force and flew 100 combat missions. And this is a copy of his graduation program. He's like number 6 down on there. You can see it's Virgil I. Grissom. This is the picture that gave us the idea of putting the photos up on the piano. That seems like how they did it. These are Wilma's 2 daughters. This was Wilma's room. Being the only girl growing up in the house, she got her own room. She told us that she had roses on the walls, so that's why this wallpaper was chosen when they went back and restored the home. This is actually the bed that she slept in, and the sewing machine is original to the home. And Mr. Grissom built the closets. The home had no closets. This would have been Virgil's room, and then later Norman and Lowell also moved into this room. The bed is actually the bed that Virgil slept in when he was in their home. The shotgun he bought between his junior and senior years in high school. He had paper routes, and he also worked for the B&O Railroad. His father was a railroader, and so he did what he called slave labor, mowing right-of-way with scythes and chopping down scrub brush and all that kind of stuff. But he bought that gun. Picture on the wall here shows Virgil in probably the 3rd or 4th grade. He's a little guy back here in the bow tie and V-neck sweater. And this is a copy of his birth certificate from the state. And this is a copy of his military discharge from the Army. The knife here he actually made in shop class. He's got a hunting dog carved in the handle. And this is actually his shop manual. Look closely, you can see it says Virgil I. Grissom. The family always referred to him as Virgil. They never said Gus. Gus didn't come along until he was in college. He would sign things Gris, and somebody mistook Gris for Gus. And he didn't really care for it. But you know how your friends are. When they find out you don't like something, they're going to continue to call you that. And that's exactly what happened. So the Gus finally stuck.
I saw references to Greasy before Gus.
That was his high school. If you look at his high school yearbook, next to his picture it says Greasy. This is Lowell's leather jacket. The door is something we're really proud of. This door was not here when the present board took over the home 3 years ago. It was just a cardboard, straight passage type door. Somebody who came through the home 2 years ago on our Christmas tour emailed me a couple of days later and says, we think we have your door. They saw this picture with this door. And they had bought it at an auction or a flea market or something. And they'd always intended to use it in their cabin. They had a log cabin, but they said they never could actually find the place that it would fit. And so they hadn't done anything with it. So they brought it to me and I cleaned it up last summer and got it cleaned up and back in the home. Board president was a high school history teacher. And so he had all this stuff in his room. But now he's assistant principal, so he doesn't have a room to share it in. So he loaned all his stuff here. So starts here with the Mercury program, goes around to the Gemini, and then over here is the Apollo disaster. And Steve, in his classes, he was trying to impress upon the kids, you know, how important Gus was. And they just couldn't fathom, you know, a kid from Mitchell being important, you know, and that kind of thing. So he was showing a film, and this big tall guy walks across to shake Betty's hand. And he stopped the film and says, "You see that guy?" And they said, "Yeah, who's that?" And they said, "That was the President of the United States." And they go, "The President of the United States came to his funeral?" And that's when it hit. This guy was somebody. Mm-hmm. And so we try to impress all the kids that come through. We've had over 600 kids come through this year, and we have 120 coming this Thursday. That's what we try to impress on, you know, that he wasn't the best student. He didn't come from the richest family in town. But when you set your mind to it and apply yourself, you can actually become whatever you want to be.